Okay. I guess we should have shown this slide while you were giving your introductions. We came more prepared than any of you with our introductions. So, Barb pretty much said that both John and I are working together on a website called Teachers Try Science. We just launched a month ago in beta. So you could go out there right now and take a look at it, teacherstryscience.org.
We are officially live now.
Yeah.
Beta is gone.
Oh, okay. Officially golden now. There is a small pool of teachers, mostly in the United States, using the site, already uploading and sharing their lesson plans and teaching strategies for each other's benefit. The next step that the set of teachers wants to take is to take it worldwide, internationalize the site. The plan for the next year is to translate the site into 4 languages: French, Spanish, Chinese, and Japanese. We're going to start with Spanish and get that working and then expand into other languages. So as we're starting this effort, hi Mike Connor, as we're starting this effort, we're learning about how to internationalize the site. So the slides you're about to see are literally fresh off the griddle. We are learning just as you are learning. There is a lot to do in internationalizing a site. What we do know, and the conversation I just had with Trent a few minutes ago, is that if you've done this kind of work in Drupal 6, the tasks that you perform in Drupal 7 will be quite different. So migrating from one to the other will be a challenge. There is some good online documentation that will help you through it. More good news is that if you've translated raw content already in Drupal 6, much of that translation can carry over very nicely into Drupal 7. It seems that the work you're going to have to do all over again from scratch is the administrative work, the configuration work. Where we went first was, of course, Google. And we were looking for how best can we learn. Unfortunately, Drupal.org, although it has pages set up explaining how to do internationalization in Drupal 7, many of those pages are just placeholders. They're empty. So we had to go elsewhere outside of Drupal.org. There is an excellent blog, this first one right here, Gabor Hutsky's blog. I don't know how I pronounce it properly. He wrote a 6-part series on internationalization in Drupal 7. He also has a single PDF page that summarizes that enormous bit of work into one page. Go there. He also explains a lot what tasks you have to perform in Drupal 6 versus what you have to perform in Drupal 7. He doesn't really talk much about migrating from one to the other, but at least you could fill in the blanks. Drupal.org, again, this is where to go. You'll find most of the pages are empty. And then there are a couple of blogs that don't go into the amount of detail that Gabor went into, but will be helpful to you anyway. They were helpful to us. Before we really get into it, the question we had in our own mind is, we've heard the term localization and multilingual and internationalization all thrown around, and we weren't quite clear what they all meant. So let's define some things. First is localization. As we see here, these definitions come from Wikipedia. The process of adapting a system for use in a particular locale other than the one it was originally developed for. So imagine translating an entire site, UI, content, everything, from English, say, to Spanish. And the final destination is Spanish. English no longer exists. What you've just done was localize the site. In contrast, multilingual means that you can keep your UI in your native language, whatever it is, but be able to provide content in multiple languages and allow the user to switch between multiple languages. That would be multilingual. And in contrast to that, take multilingual, but now also add the capability to change the UI into any language you want. And when you do that, UI plus content, you have a fully internationalized site. And that's what we were trying to attempt now with teacherstryscience.org. Okay. We had a chat when we walked in that when you internationalize a site, there's a lot of tasks to do, and it's important that you do some of these tasks in a specific order. The first thing first is you have to ask yourself, will you be translating to a double byte language? Well, what is that? Some languages are English-like. They come from a Latin root where the characters in those languages, each character can occupy a single byte. In contrast, there are some more complex languages like Chinese and Japanese that require 2 bytes to cover a single character. By default, Drupal's database is a single byte database. So if you have a project requirement to translate to a double byte language like Chinese or Japanese or Arabic, you first need to convert your database to double byte. If you're starting from scratch, the job is easy. You could create your database from a command line using this command. The key word in this command is UTF-8, which means double byte. That's the easy path. If you are like us, we have to do things the hard way. Our first launch of teacherstryscience.org was a single byte database. So we had to convert ours to a double byte database. We figured out how to do it. Essentially, at a high level, take 3 steps. First is take a snapshot of your existing database to a .mysql file. You could use that with a command line. You could use that through Drupal's admin GUI as well. And when you do take that snapshot, what you get is a flat text file, which is a version of your database expressed in flat text. The second step is to go into that flat text and do a global search and replace. Change Latin 1 to UTF-8. In other words, change single byte to double byte specification. You'll see that Latin 1 specification on every table definition and also globally. Go ahead.
The thought process is the same, similarly if you have it done in Postgres, but Postgres also lets you define a database at a global level at whatever character set you are. But if you have a Postgres database defined like that, steps are very similar. Same thing.
Okay.
Dump it, change it, pop it back up.
That was step 3, is re-import the new snapshot. Again, you could do that with command line, or you could do it through Drupal's administrative database. When we did that, we turned Japanese on, and it worked.
You have to worry about collating sequence, collation sequence, when you convert things?
I'm not familiar with the term.
No, we just had to run the
Right.
query and set it. Initially, when you create the database, it has collation set. But I mean, to do the conversion from Latin to UTF-8, we didn't have to worry about anything like that with our site. Now, there could be another gotcha down the road. So we haven't hit it yet.
Okay. 2 tasks at a very high level is translate the UI and translate your content. Let's take one at a time. First is translating the UI. Drupal provides a suite of modules, an international suite of modules, and also with Drupal core there is a locale module. Go into the administrative interface and enable it. It performs more than localization. It translates the UI as well, or participates in translating the UI. So digging into that, once you enable the locale module, go to Administration Configuration, Regional and Language, Regional Settings. Don't worry, these slides will be available, and Utsu's video will be available to you. So these slides kind of get into a good set of details, so you could literally read these slides and follow the instructions and get going. Set your default country there. For most of us, it's going to be English, or US. Once you do that, you will find at Administration, Configuration, Regional and Languages, a set of 5 tabs. This is pretty much your home base for the administrative changes you're going to make when you internationalize your site. The first tab is the tab that will allow you to add a language. The way to do that is go to the link circled in blue, Add Language, and that will take you to a drop-down list which gives you a very long array of languages. It's most likely that the language you're going to need to translate to will be there for you, unless it's some very, very small, rare language. But you're smiling. Do you have a rare language to translate to?
No, but there's over 7,000 languages if you go to the ISO standard, so I'm sure that that covered pretty much all the major ones.
The major ones.
There's on Drupal's website, it does have a chart of, again, the status of where each language is at and who and what language is there. I mean, again, I think it's over 700 right now that are GUI translated. So basically the administrative basic interface. But again, there's still text inside that, which we'll show you in a slide and also on the web on a percentage of each language or what's been translated or not in there, of just JavaScript text, error debugging, and so forth. So.
Okay. So what just happened when we added that language? We've enabled the user interface to be translated. If you go to the administrative UI, you won't see any translations yet, but you've set it up to be translated. Registered users can select their preferred language now, and authors can assign a specific language to content. Again, this is all potential. You really haven't seen anything yet, though. You still have to make some more administrative changes. First is you have to enable how Drupal decides on what language is used. There could be a number of ways Drupal can do it. By URL, by user preferences, by the browser's language settings, and more choices. You could also arrange order of precedence in these detection methods. We weren't able to get everything working. Some of these things did not work. But the way we wanted to have it work was luckily the way it did work for us. If you place URL at the top and enable it, it will work for you.
And what he's saying by work is we turned it on, we really didn't go to this page, but there's a block that says language selector in the left. You put that block in whatever section you want on your theme, and you go to the page, it's not there. And it just stays blank. And you don't know how, and a language selector is not showing up in your content and so forth. And until we check these boxes, then magically your language selector shows up on the page.
Okay.
So it's a lot of debugging and trial and error, especially with version 7. So.
Okay. So what do the rest of the tabs do? The icons tab, we won't get into details about this because there's just way too much to show. But we will be talking a little bit about the latter tabs. The icons tab allows you to add and place language icons. The language switcher tab allows you to determine which content to show in the context of the current page. The sharing tab enables sharing translations with a translation server, like localized.drupal.org. We're going to be talking about that a lot in just a moment. So we're going to be returning to that tab. Okay, so after doing all of that configuration, like I just said, you're not going to see any visible changes on the site yet. The reason being is that you still need the actual words that you're translating to, the actual translated words. So using Babelfish from the Hitchhiker's Guide movie, until you provide Drupal with the translation files themselves, you really can't see anything. There is a site called localized.drupal.org. This will be the heart of your translation. This is where the entire Drupal community contributes translated strings. They contribute translated strings to core. They could also contribute translated strings to individual modules. Typically, an individual module will have a special file called a .po file, which contains the translations themselves. That doesn't mean that there has to be a one-to-one correspondence between a module and a PO file. A PO file can apply to any part of your Drupal site. This is just a convenient way of organizing your translations. LocalizedDrupal.org will also show you the progress of each language, of how far Drupal core was translated. For the most common languages to translate to, at least for us, Spanish and French, core is 100% translated. Chinese and Japanese, I believe, is 100% as well.
No, it's close, but not quite.
Okay. All right. So a little bit more about the PO files. Again, each module can have its own set of PO files, typically one per language. So Views module might have French.po, Spanish.po, etc. The inside of a PO file looks something like this. Very simple. It's just a flat text file with a set of name-value pairs. Enable module developers and a translated string of what that means. Okay. So how many of you have developed with Drupal and are familiar with the T API? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. In the T API, you specify a string. For example, T, paren, quote, hello world, quote, paren, semicolon. That hello world, if the PO file doesn't exist, it will just show up on your screen as hello world. Hello world corresponds to the message ID. So if you were to translate to another language, you would have to specify in a PO file written by you, hello world as a message ID, and then message string, whatever hello world is translated to. Okay. All right. So many of you may be thinking, well, my Drupal site has a lot of modules and a lot of PO files, and people from the Drupal community are constantly contributing to modules, so it means I have to keep up with PO files being changed all the time. It sounds like an administrative nightmare to do that. LocalizedDrupal.org can help you automate and monitor the continual updating of those PO files. There is a localization update module. So if you're using LocalizedDrupal.org, download this module. It will detect the modules you have on your site and go out to LocalizedDrupal.org and confirm that your PO files are up to date. And if not, it will automatically update those PO files for you. Or it could just allow you to do it manually whenever you want. That corresponds to the Translation Updates tab on your main control area. So this slide pretty much explained what I just said. Again, go out to localizationdrupal.org and pull the PO files for you, either automatically or manually. Here is the interface. Update source, when it says local files and remote server, what it means by remote server is exactly localizedDrupal.org. Update mode, this is kind of small writing, but essentially it's saying, do you want to replace your PO files wholesale or just leave your old ones there? Check for updates, never daily, this is for automatic updating. And this will allow you to update only modules you have enabled or both enabled and disabled modules. So here's a small piece, a screenshot of a small piece of a screen from teacherstryscience.org, which uses probably 30 modules or so. So this screen is actually very, very long. it will show you each module and the translation status of that module on your system. So for example, here we have the voting API module. What the location update module is telling us with this yellow color and the remote update available message is that we're out of sync. The .po files on our server is out of date compared to what's on localization.drupal.org. So what we can do is click this Update Translations button. So select a language, of course, but click the Update Translation button. When that happens, your Drupal site will go out to localization.drupal.org, download all the necessary latest and greatest .po files. And when that happens, we return to this screen. Everything is green. You get the up-to-date signal. Okay. One more thing you need to do is set up a translation block. The block is already there, provided for you by the locale module. All you have to go is to the blocks administrative GUI, turn it on, put it somewhere. We put it here on our front page. There it is. And go ahead and click on a language. See what happens. When we click on French and go to the administrative GUI, this is too small to see, but our administrative commands are now in French. Our administrative UI is French. And we had to write no code to make that happen. Non-administrative users can see those translations too. Because when a user is saying adding a node or editing a node, you could give that user access to do that. Technically, that's an administrative function. The user will see it right away. You can see the French translations here. This is an interesting example. We have a group content type on our site with some generic fields and then some custom fields that we've created. These are custom fields. Notice that these did not get translated. Why? Because there is nothing in any PO file that knows what we did specific to our site.
Okay, so you have a default translation that can be downloaded from the locale. How do you add on for the custom translation?
Okay, two-part answer. One part is, and we haven't started this yet, we have a lot of custom modules of our own, including a utilities module. The plan is for us to write our own .po file and put our specific translations in that. Drupal will recognize all PO files you have loaded in your Drupal tree. So our custom translated strings should be picked up in our custom PO file. The second part of that answer, we're going to wait for a few minutes because John is going to talk about how to translate specific fields in a custom content type.
Because it's really not in a PO file, it's just really built into the database itself. So,
I don't know if it's available for Drupal 7 or not, but in 6 there was a string translation module.
it is available, it's very buggy, and because I tried using it just to change titles or try to find words just in the English side, and it wouldn't overwrite. But the module that we are using, it basically gives, it kind of corresponds to that module, and I'll show it in a second.
Okay. Go ahead.
If you want to keep the admin part in English and have the multilingual thing going, how does one accomplish that?
Essentially by skipping some of the steps that we just showed you. We haven't tried that because our goal was to make the whole thing full-blown internationalized. But a good educated guess is simply to skip some of the steps.
Well, we have that too. There's another piece that I'm going to show. It's
Okay.
part of the translation overview.
Okay, great.
So you can still use the admin interface in English or whatever language, but then as we show, the more getting into, because that's kind of the hard part where we were looking at is, do we want just content translated, but we also have input fields. I mean, we have forms that you fill out and so forth. Are we going to allow users to fill out in their own language? Or are we only going to allow English, then we grab a snapshot of that, translate the content from there and push it. Initially, that's what we're going to do, but this is the the part where we're looking at these field inputs and so forth, knowing part of it's translated, and then I'll show you in a second on the other part. So,
Okay. Big picture wise, remember this presentation is just 2 steps. Translate the UI, translate content. So everything we've done up to this point is translating UI only. So if you skip most of the steps that we just covered and go straight to translating content, you could have a multilingual site.
Are you finding that the modules are updated? I mean, because they're changing all the time, the updates in the modules. So, will you find that within a week or 2 weeks their translation's been done, or is there more of a lag time?
Are you talking about the code or the .po file?
The PO file, if it's keeping up timely with the updates in the modules.
Yeah, we don't have enough experience with the PO files yet to know the frequency of the updates of them. I think we can make an educated guess is that the bigger the module, the more frequent the updates. If it's the views module, you can bet that it's updated like crazy. But some of the lesser known modules, I don't know. Okay. All right, good segue. We've translated the UI. Part 2, let's translate content. Okay.
You can go ahead with this if you want.
Yeah, do these, and then we're going to go to, I think I have like 3 or 4 more.
Okay, no,
And then we,
I couldn't
move
remember
to
when
the
it switched over.
Yeah. Okay, so John's going to show you a list of modules that are part of the internationalization suite of modules. But enabling the locale module plus some other basic internationalization modules will add this multilingual support section to your content type definition. So if you enable multilingual support, you'll now see a language selection drop-down when creating or editing a node. Okay. So here, this is an example of creating a basic page, say test page, basic in language. Okay. Once you hit save, you now have a new, if you're the admin, translation tab that appears in your set of administrative actions you can take on that node. When you click it, you will see the following. English, the blue is covering it, but it's essentially it says original, the original node. And the status of versions of that node in other languages. So what this is telling you is that the French node version of that node, there are 2 different nodes, has not yet been translated, nor has Spanish. If you click on one of these untranslated nodes, you'll get to a new node creation screen where that language is selected by default and grayed out. And you can enter your content in the language of choice. In this case, it's test page in French. And hit save. Once you do that, status changes to complete. Under the covers, these are 2 different nodes, where the French node is referencing the original node, which is in English, the default language.
Bill,
Yes.
do you know if that works with revisions?
Haven't tried that, but my guess is it must. It seems to be such a basic, necessary thing.
Yes, because it is its own node type. Because
Okay.
basically it is a true new node ID, and it's all done, I think, through the entity types is how it keeps correlation with
Okay.
the English, or how Drupal knows, or how the server knows to get to
Okay.
each language. So yes.
Okay. Once you hit save on the French version, you're also provided, or the user is also provided now, a link to switch to the node in whatever translated language has been provided. So you could translate, you could switch back and forth between a French version and an English version of the same node.
But if you make a change to the original, let's say English, will it at least notify you that original has made a change? Let's say you have the French translation up to a point, then you make changes to the English. Is there any flag raised that.
saying that, hey,
Hey,
you changed
French
English,
is behind.
update French. I don't believe there is. Do you?
The only thing I think is it has like update status, when the last time the node was edited or updated. So I haven't looked that deep into that. So, but because again, we haven't really started our full translation, and what we're going to do is everything's going to be locked down before we even really start our true translation. So, at least for the initial. So.
Hey, does it have the concept of locales? Because like Argentina Spanish is much different than Spain Spanish. They have like the low.
They're working on that, and that's a roadblock that we just, well, not a roadblock, but that was a question our client did ask.
We're dealing with the same issue too.
Yeah, that's huge.
But Drupal still, there is a
Yeah, very different.
ticket created or a discussion group created to change that. Because the same way with, yeah, you have Portugal, you have Brazilian,
Yeah.
and then Portuguese, and all that just in the other parts, so.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Alrighty. You could also see a global snapshot of where all your nodes are, translation-wise and progress-wise. So here are all your nodes, and here is saying, yes, this is translated English. These two are translated into French, etc. So if you have the big task of translating your whole site, you could use this as your essentially one-page status report.
So you just showed a manual translation where you actually had to go into that alternate language node and then manually put the translation in there.
Yes.
I know in 6 we were able to accomplish automated translation. So when new content was created in a language, that it would automatically populate the French or the Spanish node with that translation. So it would have to be done manually.
Okay. Was there a module that did that for you?
I can go back and look, but yeah, we had a whole plethora of modules that we were using.
Okay. Do you, could you talk to us about that after this
Sure.
session?
Sure.
We'd like to see what you did with that. Okay, because that'll help us.
I think I know some of the ones that were in 6 and that they're not there yet. And we'll want some correlate with connecting with Google Translate as well and so forth. So it will go out and try to translate. I think where we're looking at least for the initial, until we find something like that, is something like a Google Translate that we're kind of manually going in and translating. Now, we have a division. Again, the cost for this nonprofit is a little too much to have them, but basically we could send all content to them, even through Drupal core, and they could go translate it. They have a tool and so forth. But again, the costs were just too much.
Yeah. Well, we found with our client in the past that the quality control, they would have to pretty much go back in and prove it anyway.
Right.
And so, the quality control, if you're manually translating it, you know it's right, versus Drupal just spitting out some stuff that you
Correct.
assume is correct.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Wasn't there some translation module that was set up in 6 where it was like a whole workflow, and it was with a company that does translation? Where you could
Yes.
just-
I think that could be the one he's talking about as well. But again, it's not in 7, and I don't even think they're looking at going into 7.
They do have, I forget the name of the company, they do have like basic stuff set up for 7, but it really didn't fit our model and how we wanted to translate, so.
Because again, they cost. So.
Right, yeah, it's a way to manage the outsourcing of the translation.
Do you remember the name of that company?
Can't think of it.
I think on Localized Drupal, I think there's a link to that site, or even the modules even set up from that site.
Yeah.
So, because they are incorporated with that project. So,
Okay. Alrighty. Okay, we're going to switch to John now. UI and content. What we just showed takes you 80% of the way. The devil is in the details. Particularly in translating blocks, custom content types, and views. You brought up a question before about having content in 2 different languages showing up on the same page. Well, managing blocks and views in the right way will allow you to do that. So John will get into that. We'll also talk about translation API, video closed captioning, and then we'll close out. How are we doing on time?
7:30, a little after.
Okay, we're doing all right in time.
that'll be a like.
Can I ask you to just, one thing to make clear, which I only found out recently, and I thought, duh, it's very interesting. Where the I-18N comes from?
The word internationalization has 18 characters in it.
In between.
Yeah.
And I think localization is good.
L10N.
L10N.
Yeah.
Yeah. When I found, I only found that out like last week. Yeah.
I just learned it, thanks.
All right. So this one moves a slide forward, backward, and lazy clears.
No, I probably won't be using it, so. And again, basically these submodules for the I-18N is kind of what, I based a lot of things on the research, and I just grabbed them all. And again, it's more trial and error. And again, this is just a subset of some of the ones. Again, they're kind of hard to read here. Block languages, again, that's more their language selectors. Then contact translation are kind of built-in modules to be able to translate your contact us module or pages and so forth. Field translation is, again, kind of one you were talking about. Is it truly, and I'll show you in a second, is when you are in the back end doing your construction kit or just your content type, whatever language is selected, in some cases, it will have your field, then below it, it'll have the multiple languages that you need to translate that into. And so again, it's still a manual process for the upload control on a user interface. Now again, for just displaying content, and if you're an English person and just pushing the content, it could stay in English, and again, you saw the administrative console that shows all your languages, if it's translated or not, and it'll go in more into that. And again, I mean, it's a slew of them. It goes all the way down to views translation, which I'm about to dig into. I haven't gotten there yet, but that's my next big focus for our site is, again, as Bill showed, when it creates each language content type, it creates a node for each language. Well, your view doesn't understand that right now. And so literally it shows you the same node 3 times, but you don't know what language it's in unless it's already translated. Because we're playing with English right now, so I'm looking at 3 things and I'm like, why is it shooting 3 of the same things on my view? But again, you have to go back in, build your queries based on languages and so forth. And again, here is you can customize certain blocks per language. And again, it's whatever language is activated. You don't have to code that in now. You just hit a checkbox and say, I want it in this language. And then the name of the content type itself can be translated. And again, this is going and creating your content. So right now, this is more of a lesson plan. And so your each field and each type, and it shows what module or even just test. So it's your titles and your content type. And
question. I don't know if you guys work with this. You know, when you put a menu, output a menu through a block, and then you got that block enabled to a certain language, have you guys noticed any bugs or issues with Drupal 7 not translating those menu items?
It will translate, but again, I'll show you what it happens is you have to go in and edit your menu list because menus are path type, and especially when you're using a URL alias, and it only cares about the node, even though you're using I mean, you could do a content or title name in your alias, but when you save, it automatically saves it as pointing to the node ID.
Right.
And so the trick, because I hit that, I was like, oh, you're just changing titles. I'm saying this menu 1 is French, menu 2 is Spanish, and it should change, and it never was. And the reason why is you have to basically create multiple menu items per language. So that one, like we have basically 3 main menus links on our site. So that has to be translated in that menu list 3 times at least or however many languages we want.
So it hasn't got any better from 6 to 7
No,
in that regard?
and it took me forever to, I mean, I was just banging my head figuring that out. And so, and again, this is more of an interface that you get with the Translate. It's just your basic English title, your label, and then this is what it is in French. So this is what you would see when you have created a content type in English is your basic stuff. But now I'm going into the French side, so now I can change all my labels and so forth to a French translation. Again, it's not automatic. This is still a manual process. I haven't looked that deep, but there might be a way to export this and translate it in a PO file and then bring it back in. But we haven't gone that deep into it. And again, field names are translatable as well. And again, this is just a basic field instance. It's a test field. And again, it gives you whatever language you're translating into to be able to change the titles and so forth of the existing field. And again, it's just the edit screen for that. And again, it's still a manual process. And then example of a list field type, so a good option list, and it'll show you in Drupal, you have your field and you do your array, but it'll know in the translate part to split up that array into editable fields for translation. So, but your problem is if you do add another, then you have to go back in and translate on your option list. And then Drupal allows menu translation as well, and this is where I had issues with. And you create multiple menu list items because of language-specific node IDs. Is when you create your menus, inside each one is your specific path, and it's set up to a node ID. And with this translation type, each of your translations is a different node ID. So you can't use the same menu for all your languages. So you do have to create, you have About Us, then you have to go create a French one and point that to your French node ID. So it is a little tedious, and then I guess if you do have a lot of menus or menu items, it'll take a while to get that configured. Again, we have a very small footer and a very small header that has the links.
Do you have to go to the visibility and then disable the visibility in different language? So if you have all the three, will they appear in all three there?
Yes, I mean, this is the admin menu to pull up menus. So what is it? Structure. Just structure menus, and it'll pull your list of menu items. So this is, we're only using footer menu is this example. So you'd have your primary, your secondary, and whatever menu list you create.
What I meant is that, so will it show English, French, and all three items on the screen, or it will only show one, depending upon the current language?
Current language, it will only show one.
So you have to configure that somewhere that this is in this language? Or?
Yes, and that's where this is.
Okay.
But how do you make the connection on the language switcher? So when you have different items for the same, basically, piece of content, even though you're pointing to two nodes, right?
Right.
The English and French. But when you switch language, how does it know to say, okay, now I should bring About Us French, home French? Because you...
Option set on the menu item itself.
It's obvious. So
Okay.
again, I built this slide a while back, and I haven't dug any deeper. There is it came up to a way, this knows that it's, because it's the footer menu, and I think what it's doing, it's based on node ID. And when it switches to the French, and it's
So
picking
you
up.
said there's a way to say, okay, this is...
Well, in 6, if I recall, the menu item itself, when you click the menu item, you can select the language and show it.
Oh, okay.
Right.
So this is how you match them. Because
Right.
otherwise, they're just items. Drupal is not really aware at this point that you translated and put into a different node. It's just a different menu item. But you're saying that there's a way you can match the menu item to...
I don't know about the 7, but in 6, I recall there was
Right.
an option to, just like with blocks, you can choose to show a block in a certain language, or you can also choose the menu item to show it.
That makes sense.
But what he was saying, it sounds like Drupal 7 is smart enough to...
Well, it's the translate tab, and it shows like the fields. It's basically, well, I can't switch over, because that's, I guess, a slide I missed out putting on here, but it's basically your footer menu, and then what each language and so forth. So it is translating it that way as well.
We did something similar in the Drupal 6. So we ended up doing different menus actually for each language. So
Yes.
instead of doing menu items, we just do different menus. And then the visibility of the page, you can stick whichever menu language you want.
Correct. That's the same one. So. And then again, here's an overview of translatable strings. And then this is based on Drupal core. And again, there's a whole menu item. It's under regional and language. And it shows the status of what core basically is through the localization site and the updates and where it's basically at. And then however many blocks you have translated and so forth. And then status of elements in core. This is a cool, I'm trying to think if this is the module I used. This is just a basic translate. Basically, this is every text or T language that's set up in core. And you can view it and see over here is showing again, you can only see, it's what languages you have selected, and is it translated or not already in that language. And it will give you the interface that you can click on one that has a line in it, and it'll open the document. You can either manually do it or export it in a PO file and update that and bring it back in and it'll update. But it basically shows, I mean, it's, again, there's over 600 pages here of translated content. And it's either, the majority of it, especially in Spanish and so forth, are already translated. But at least this is a good interface to know, is something in the back end, because this is more of like the jQueries or your JavaScript prompts and so forth, errors and debug mode and so forth. That's part of core. Is it translated or not? And then Bill, is this back to you?
Okay. About a third of you raised your hand in having experience with the T function. Essentially, Drupal core gives you a more fine-grained, low-level control over translating strings using code. And the T function will allow you to do that. So about 2/3 of you are unfamiliar or inexperienced with this. It's very simple. You call T, the string you want to translate, arguments to provide if your string has replaceable sections in it, and then options, which we'll get to in a second. So here's an example of the arguments you could provide. So here you have @name, and you could replace @name with just some value you could dynamically place in there. Where things get really interesting, especially in Drupal 7, is with the options array. Language code is as it was in Drupal 6. So with the T function, you can explicitly say, I want to translate this particular string to Spanish, and another T string where you could translate some other string to another language. That's the same as it was in Drupal 6. What Drupal 7 can give you is the notion of context. What do we mean by that? Say, for example, you have the word in English, May. It can mean a couple of things. It can mean May the month. It could mean I may go to the movies tonight. So English is ambiguous that way. And so what the T function can give you is the ability to specify the context in which you're using an ambiguous word. So where would the context be defined? The answer is the PO file. The PO file can allow you to optionally add a context string to a name value pair. So this is a real world example from a Serbian PO file where message ID is May. Here is the Serbian translation, but only in the context of long month name. There are some helpers for developers in this room. There are some helper modules for you. One is the coder module, which will detects mistakes in API usage of just any API you're calling, including the T function. So if you're using the T function improperly, the coder module will tell you. There is also a module called Translation Template Extractor. It parses Drupal modules for translatable strings. A very common thing that happens in modules written by the community is that there are hard-coded strings in there that are not surrounded by the T function, which technically is fine, it'll work, but best practices wise is not the way to go. But this module will detect that, and it will also, of course, detect if you're doing that in your own code as well, in your own custom modules. Finally, I mentioned this at the very top of the presentation, Gabor's Drupal 7 translation cheat sheet. Again, he has a several-part blog series which he translated all into one single PDF page. So go to this URL and you can see it. Closed captioning.
Basically what we were looking at is we have a couple of videos on our site and so forth, and are we going to translate the true video, which has audio in it, or just do a closed captioning? And we're more looking into the basic closed captioning side of that, just for the ease of use, basically. And so with closed captioning, JW FLV player will work as well as flow player. And then as we're looking at XML document based on the W3C time text specification. And then the main part is the code, the node link with the video file to pass the selected language. So basically you'll have your XML file related with your video, and then as long as the ID is passed in with the link, it should show the closed captioning. So again, we need this as well, with English as well, to make it accessible. So, and that was pretty much too much, not enough on that, but that's all we really have on it. So.
By the way, the third name there, Lee Tilt, he's a co-author of this presentation. He couldn't be with us today.
What about some more like, trying to think of kind of like more up-to-date, you know, applications like maybe tags or even texting or chat functions? Is there any way to translate something like that?
I think some of the newer modules that handle that are just basically the messengers will or have the option to, I guess it would be computer-based, what your language is on your computer or how you're typing it. But again, our site, well, we haven't looked that deep because our site's just more content. It's not an interactive site. So.
Also, just wondering if you know what like kind of, I mean, I'm on a lower level server, so I have some problems just with the memory usage. I've upgraded since then, but I still know that it might be pretty intensive resource usage. Do you measure that?
We have not measured it, but I'm running it with no issues with, again, I created 6 languages onto my Mac with 8 gigs of RAM. So with an i7 processor. Again, our site's hosted on a cloud, so again, it's unlimited. So, but I haven't seen any performance hits yet.
And your memory allocation in your...
No, it's fine. So, I mean, again, I'm at 3 gigs still available. So.
Okay.
See, initially, there was one slide which said that the original word is say in the English language, and then you have to translate for every other language, right?
Correct.
So, supposing what can it be done in reverse? Like, say, for example, if there is a European media company for which the original content is in, say, French.
Yes.
So,
I mean, that's based on your default language code on the initial setup. So again, ours is set up as US, so it's more, I guess, English-based. So if you did, I haven't tried that on here, but I'm sure if your initial language is French or Spanish or so forth, your interface, as Bill showed, the administrative menu and so forth, is translated for that language. And so you would see the initial, to a point as much as has been translated with Drupal core, you would see that interface. So label and so forth would be already translated.
Those I believe anyway the original will be English because Drupal itself is in English, right?
But the administrative menu, let me see if I can
I
show.
was more talking of the content part.
Right, so when you build your CCK, you would build it with your language. So the labels and so forth, and then that's where it would come back and even, well, it would even be right here. I even think, depending on how far Drupal core got with their language, by changing this, it would be French here. And then you would have your French title. And then below would be your optional languages. I mean, you would go to this interface here then, instead of your source being English, your source is going to be your language. Is that where you're going?
Okay. So we've got, I think we're at the top of the hour. Hang on. About 5 minutes. Should we show what's on your Mac or close enough for you?
It's up to you.
Did we have access online at all to see?
Not for the multilingual.
Do you have any like an actual website that have both like to show me how it works? Because my understanding is like word-to-word translation is easy, but if you have a large content like the paragraph, the automatic translation, or you have to
It is not automatic translation.
get manual.
It's manually translated.
How it works.
Because again, initially what we're looking at, yes, because of Like we said, there are third-party companies that are willing to do it, but again, it's a fee that can connect. And then I have forgotten some of the other sites that handle that. And again, I haven't been able to find them. Or am I even on the network?
What's the difference between Try Science and Teachers Try Science in terms of how they work together? Or
TriScience was initially built, and again, it is not in Drupal yet. We're eventually going to look to put it in Drupal. Again, that site was built over 13 years ago, and again, they wanted to use all this IBM proprietary software and OS and hardware, and so right now it's still built on HTTP server, IBM, which is Apache derivative, and then WebSphere and DB2. And again, a lot of the stuff on that site is mostly Flash and custom code within that.
well,
And
in other words, what was the purpose of that site compared to Teachers Try Science?
it's the same client, it's the same sponsors. And so again, Teachers Try Science is for the teachers, Try Science is for the kids. And again, it's more focused toward the elementary, lower.
Like a How Stuff Works type site. or
Exactly.
something.
And it's interactive, it's games, it's science, experiments and so forth for kids. And then there's a parent link that shows different activities parents can do with the kids. Now, the Teachers Try Science side is going to be more interactive with the teachers for videos, for learning, for teachers to pull down to teach in their class and so forth, as well as, the correlating to standards and so forth. So a teacher from any state could go in and look for their standard or request a standard type. And it's lesson plans, it's videos, and again, it's creating groups and organizations to collaborate with.
Have you gotten to any display from languages right to left rather than left?
Not yet. Again, TriScience was, but again, that's more of a hard code custom. It wasn't put in a content tool. So again, it's just flat HTML that we did send off to a translation center, and they translated it, and we brought it back down.
If you're not a teacher in a system, but say maybe you have some content where you would like to do lesson plans for that content to provide it to teachers, is there access for people who are not?
Yes, it is open to the public. I mean, you register, you have access to upload videos, to upload lesson plans, content, create groups, join groups. Yep.
If you had a site going live in 6 months, in production 6 months, and you had to start development like next week, would you go with Drupal 6 or 7?
Depending on what you want to do with it. The main part, the biggest roadblock we've hit is videos, is media, the media module. And I read it, and I'm like, oh, this is great, let's do it. And we started doing it, then there's no players that associate, and it kind of fell down, but we hacked it to get it at least up and running. Okay. But hopefully within the next 2 weeks, they're having a huge, almost birds of a feather. It's like they've called everyone to come in and get media ready finally to launch. And I think once they get that, and another part used to be the video module, and that was connected with FFmpeg, and you could do the translation or transcoding and so forth. Now they finally have a interactive module that I got created that will do that now for media. And so it's still, everything else, I haven't hit any really major roadblocks, and it's helped a little. And Bill has some more on his side of it.
So the you have major modules, things like views, token, path auto, CCK, they seem to work well in Drupal 7. Strangely, when Drupal 7 was originally initially launched, the couple of weeks after that point, actually views was not working very well. But it's working. It's looking good now. Organic groups is a major module that a lot of people used. We had to use it on our site, and we found it very incomplete.
Yeah.
It worked, but not as completely as it worked in Drupal 6. There were just some functionality in that module that was just flat out missing.
I had some problems with it too.
So we had to write the missing parts ourselves. So what I recommend you do is take your best guess at the modules you need, make yourself a checklist in a spreadsheet, and one by one go to Drupal.org and check the status of each of those modules. If you have a healthy subset that's completely, golden code, out of beta and ready to go, then go for it. But if you have like a third or more that are not in that state, then I think you're wiser to stay with Drupal 6.
Okay.
And again, we're still using a lot of beta on here, and that's the hard part, is they've come up with all this, the new entity relations and the entity module. And a lot of old modules weren't using it, and now they're trying to, everything's going to this entity type relation and entity IDs instead of and having the relations that way. And so a lot of stuff's breaking because people are trying to go to that route or follow the new path or the new way of Drupal 7. And so it's kind of breaking. Again, I had fill groups. I wanted multi-step process in a form, and there was a multi-step module. I used it. Again, a couple of iterations of fill group. I didn't pay any attention. Happened to dig in it. It has multi-step built into it now. And they don't tell you, and then I'm using this whole separate module. And again, the core is even cleaner now. And so now I have to rewrite my code to correspond with that, if we want it to continue moving easier. But again, a lot of classes are changing on the fly, so again, theming sometimes is hard, especially if you're doing a lot of custom CSS coding or adding to it, because we've hit that is you update a module, you go out, your site's completely blank now because it's not looking at any of your CSS. And it's because they're changing class names and IDs on the fly. And they're not telling you that in the releases. They're just doing it. So it's a lot of trial and error, but the benefit is this client was we knew we could get it up and running pretty good in 7, and we explained to them that it's better to be this, especially since it's a new site. You're not converting over. And again, we had it built kind of in 6, but we realized 7, we were trying to make it 7 the way, and at least to play around with as well, to have a project to be able to do it. And it was in a state in 6 that we could easily get it going in 7. So that's kind of the path we took. So
Thank you.
On that note, one of our last sites, we went from 6 to 7, back to 6, and then back to 7, all in about a 2 weeks period.
So
That just made me nauseous.
it happened.
The whole point of the exercise was to get certain things in there, and I convinced them some of those things they wanted weren't necessary, so we went back to 6. And I realized I needed field collections and some other things that needed to be on there, so I just got to go with the site.
Wow.
Because I mean, a lot of bugs is, especially Drupal still has its core image and video and file upload and so forth. But again, the future is the media module. And again, it's just still and then the person that built it, Aaron Winborn, now he's not even able to be the back-end support for it, but Acquia has picked it up.
Okay.
And so that's the hope for it, is because the whole, at least 5 people from Acquia have picked it up to do it. So.
What products is IBM using overall for most projects? I mean, you guys often work in Drupal, but is it pervasive now? Is it?
No. I will say, IBM is enormous.
Yes.
Think of IBM as having several major branches, but the 3 biggest ones are research, software, and services. John and I are in services. We're in a tiny subset of services, a tiny corner of services. So, Drupal fits what our department does very well. That's why we tend to do a lot of Drupal projects. But on the whole, the services part of IBM tends to use other products, particularly IBM products. We're definitely in a minority within services. But the general ethic of the services branch of IBM is provide the technology that best fits the customer's requirements, not sell IBM software. And often our department the projects we get and the requirements we get are a very good fit for Drupal. And sometimes other things like Rails, a lot of Flash. But that's it.
So, I mean, does IBM have other than content management
Yes.
products that are there custom or
Yeah, there's
proprietary?
there is a proprietary IBM software group product called WebSphere Content Manager. If
Okay.
anybody's familiar with WebSphere Portal Server, it's an enormous web application, and there's an add-on called WebSphere Content Manager, which provides a subset of what Drupal does. The two work very well with one another, WebSphere Content Manager and WebSphere itself. When you try to use WebSphere Content Manager solo, it's more challenging to do that. But again, given the customer's requirements, sometimes that's the best fit for what they need. And so IBM does a lot of it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.